because I've never done any higher education before. I left school at 14 years old and began a carpentry apprenticeship with my father's youngest brother. And I haven't been in any sort of education since I was 14 years old, and that was high school. It was too early to leave, really, but the school kept it quiet because they didn't like me and they didn't want me to come back. But I recently enrolled into something in the realm of a mental health diploma, and I was accepted. I didn't have an educational transcript, so I had to do all these tests, but I was accepted pretty quickly. I paid the fees and started the classes. This was quite recently, and got about 4 or 5 weeks in, and then the teachers found out who I was. And immediately the course leader pulled me aside one day before I got to walk into the classroom. And I could feel gradually the demeanor. At first, I was accepted as an exemplary student. I was doing all of the work. I wasn't saying much in class, and the contributions I did make to the discussion were quite good. At least that's what they told me. But then I think it began with a student recognizing me, because I felt her eyes on me a few times, and then she shared who I was with some other students, and then the teachers found out about it, and gradually I felt the demeanor change. People in the class, students and the teachers, began to become standoffish, even hostile towards me, in a quiet way, but I could feel the energy change. So I expected and felt that this was coming. The course leader said that because I have a criminal history, I wouldn't be accepted into placement, which is kind of like work experience, so I wouldn't be able to complete the course anyway. But that was just an excuse. He did not want me there. The other teachers did not want me there, and several of the students did not like me. They didn't want me there. The only reason I chose to go into this course is because I've always had an interest in, giving people perspective. People have come to me for perspective. And I seem to be good at listening to people, organizing their thoughts for them and putting it back inside their minds in such a way where they can go and live their lives in a way where they've got a bit more confidence and, they're just a bit more positive. That's what people do when I do personal training as well. They tell me a lot of their problems. I end up listening to them and trying to give them some advice. So that's what gave me the idea. Might as well go into counseling or something like that as well, right? I didn't expect I'd be able to get through the course anyway, because I know how these institutions work. And, I was right to expect that this is what would happen. I haven't actually withdrawn from the course yet, but I probably will. Because, I wouldn't expect that they would pass me anyway. They'd find a reason to fail me, regardless if I did the work or not. But the reason I'm telling you this story is it was in a university department. And there was one part of the course, even though it was a course on mental health, there was one part of the course called Promote Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Cultural Safety. The instructor or teacher for this course, and half the students in my class, was probably about 15 people who were fresh out of high school, right? So they were fairly young and impressionable. The teacher was teaching the students, myself included, that white colonials came here to Australia to deliberately commit a genocide against the Aboriginals, suggesting that we actually brought diseases in vials and deliberately released them to conscientiously kill off as many Aboriginal people as possible. There were stories told, with no evidence, but there were stories told that white colonials buried Aboriginal babies, stole them, buried them up to their heads, and kicked their heads off for sport. It's also being taught to the students, this is at a university level education, that Aboriginal children were also stolen from their families, who were also killed or massacred. They love that word, massacre. We stole their children, apparently, and we strung them up to trees, stripped them naked, and just whipped them until they died, which would take days. And we did this for no apparent reason other than we just felt like it. There's other various horror stories, which are akin to the sort of stories you would hear coming out of the Holocaust fable. It's like someone just made them up and tried to make them seem as gruesome as possible. And I sat there and I listened to this for weeks. And I didn't argue, I didn't say anything. But several of the other students did argue. And at one particular point, the class broke down because one woman, an older student, suggested that some of this wasn't true, and that maybe some of this was propaganda, and that, now there were other people coming into this country and white people didn't have the same rights as these other people. And she even suggested that white people were being replaced by immigrants from other countries who are, just like pushing them out of certain markets. And, the instructor suggested that maybe she's racist and that she's in the wrong class. And I didn't say a word. I didn't participate in the argument, but it was funny to see the class almost break down over this. But the point is, students at university level education are being taught that there was a deliberate, brutal genocide against Aboriginal people, with all sorts of horrific tales about torture, senseless torture that occurred for no reason at the hands of white colonials against Aboriginal people. Okay. And a lot of them believe it. They believe it. There's quizzes and tests where you're supposed to answer correctly. How many Aboriginals were tortured on this occasion? How many Aboriginals were killed on this occasion at this massacre and this massacre? And there's like this list, government website list. I'm going to have to find it. I'm not sure where it is. But every interaction between a white colonial and an Aboriginal person prior to the Federation of Australia is listed as a massacre, even if only one Aboriginal person died, and even if it was a reprisal attack for rape or murder. It's listed as a massacre and a genocide event, right? So that's why people at MRIT would be relentlessly campaigning against people in support of the no vote, because they've been brainwashed by consistent, relentless anti-white propaganda. They're also taught that Aboriginal people have no responsibility over their own thoughts and actions because of intergenerational trauma. What that means is they are suggesting that Aboriginal people now, or even people who are partially Aboriginal, have experienced so much trauma in their family line that nothing they do, if it's murder, if it's theft, drug use, rape, none of it is their own responsibility. It's all because of intergenerational trauma that they've inherited from their parents and their parents, and it's all the fault of white colonials. It's always white people. It's their fault. Whatever Aboriginal people are doing or not doing, it's white people's fault. They're taught that now in university. This isn't a conspiracy. I just witnessed it myself a couple of months ago. And what's most astounding is the teacher was very thrilled with my explanation of what propaganda is. And the Aboriginal rights or promote rights Aboriginal teacher, the one we had, what she believed was the white media was responsible for, denigrating Aboriginal people and making Aboriginal people seem like they were an underclass and something like that. She believed that we needed to be more alert to propaganda, especially from mainstream media. But then she went on to show us videos from Channel 9, ABC, SBS, emotional propaganda videos depicting Aboriginal suffering at the hands of white people, fully complete with emotional music and eyewitness testimonies about white men taking Aboriginal babies away. And I thought, well, doesn't she understand that she's showing us mainstream media propaganda right now? She's telling us to be more alert to it because it's all against Aboriginals. But she seems to be blind to the fact that Aboriginal people have their own channel in Australia, funded by the government, called National Indigenous TV. And all the videos she was showing us to prove that Aboriginal people had suffered at the hands of white people were produced by mainstream media. I couldn't believe it. It was like, that didn't actually make sense to me, that a person can think one thing, but then demonstrate that they actually don't understand what they're talking about in the same sentence. But anyway, the point is that the anti-white, pro-Aboriginal propaganda is relentless at university level education. And because a lot of the university students are fresh out of high school, they're quite young and naive, they don't seem to understand that what they're being exposed to is relentless propaganda. They actually believe it. And they probably think by censoring and making life hard for people who are in support of the no vote, that they're doing something good because Aboriginal people are suffering from intergenerational trauma and that kind of thing. So yeah, that's just my personal view.
Maybe we should do a deep dive next week into the truth about Aboriginal history, because if you want to talk about intergenerational trauma, that's probably true, but intergenerational trauma isn't because of us. It's because of them. It's because of them raping and eating their own babies and children generation after generation after generation.
No. According to the teacher that I had a couple of months ago, Aboriginal people are completely peaceful. They're very peaceful, passive, they don't fight. It's only white people that impose that warlike nature on them. And that's why they didn't offer up much resistance against the white colonials, because before the white colonials arrived, they were a peace-loving, passive people that didn't really do war.
There were cannibalistic rapists, cannibalistic, incestuous racists.
Well, I don't know what the truth is because I haven't seen it myself. All I know is that this is what these people at university believe, and it's what they teach each other. Yeah, they teach each other.
Yeah,
Basically,
but
the whole
we'll go
premise
through
is
some
the whole
documentation. We'll do some deep dives into it because I think it's important for the people to be armed with these talking points for conversations. Because when I get into a discussion with people about Aboriginals and I just start pulling up, like the you know the evidence of like mass infanticide, cannibalism, uh, the fact that Aboriginal incest is still a problem today. There's many reports of social workers and police going in and finding entire Aboriginal families with kids as young as 4 and 5, where the entire family has the same sexually transmitted disease.
Yeah, but if you
I
tell
mean,
people in school,
it's
if you tell
horrific.
university, they've just got the perfect retort or rebuttal to anything that the Aboriginal people are doing that is abhorrence in their own communities. It's white people's fault. That's what they believe at university. It's intergenerational trauma as a result of the colonial takeover of Australia, the invasion of Australia. It's all white people's fault. No Aboriginal person would be hurting another Aboriginal person or abusing another Aboriginal
Yeah, well, it's
person
just
or even abusing
nonsense.
themselves. It's all white people's fault. They actually believe that. That's what they believe.
I mean, it's white people's fault that they are as civilized as they are now. Like, we've cleaned them up. We've stopped them from eating people, eating their own children, raping their own children to such a large extent. People talk about the stolen generations. They don't talk about why did these white Christian workers, nuns, and social workers and so on, why did they want to take the Aboriginal kids away from their parents? If you hate a race, you don't go, I want to go and really take care of all of their children. That's not what racists want to do. Like, if I don't like black people, I don't go, you know what I want to do? I want to go adopt a bunch of black kids and raise them as my own. That makes no sense. Why were
Mm.
it was an act of compassion because of how they were treating their own children. The fact that they were raping and literally eating their own children in some cases, but they were raping their own children, abusing their own children, and so on. They were trying to protect those children. I don't think it was misguided. They probably should have just left them. But it was based in too much compassion. The white man has been too compassionate to Aboriginals, always has been.
Well, they don't
It's the
they don't even
exact opposite.
understand sometimes. There was a TED talk that we were shown when I was in class. It was by an Aboriginal woman who was talking about how badly she was treated in one of the homes that was set up by the government in Australia to house and take care of Aboriginal children who were either orphans or had been taken from their parents because they were being abused, or that was just the excuse, they say. But she was talking about the fact that they didn't get a lot of food and that they had to wear the same clothes and they only got their clothes washed once per week. And, their beds weren't always clean and it was cold. And I'm thinking to myself, that's just reality. It was the same for the colonials when they arrived. What, you think colonial white children all lived in castles? No, they were also poor. They were also struggling to eat as much as they wanted to eat. They also probably only washed their clothes once a week. That's the way things went during the colonization of Australia for everybody involved. So I'm thinking to myself, this woman's really just victimizing herself. She's not really being grateful for the fact that, she had a roof over her head. She had cotton clothes to wear, which she wouldn't have had without colonials anyway. She had food served to her every day. She was part of a little community. There were other girls she could associate with, and she's still alive and healthy today, probably as a result of one of these homes set up by the government. Not that I'm a fan of the government, you know what I mean, but the government of, yesteryear was probably a little bit less posed.
Anyway, let's move on to this. So, political persecution of our friends is something quite common, but we're going to bring Mehdi on to